Hi, we're having a conversation with Dr. Mark Skousen. He's the editor of Forecast and Strategies,
Right.
a newsletter. Dr. Skousen, you are also the author of a book about innovations in economics.
Yes.
What are these three innovations?
Well, I've written this textbook, Economic Logic, which people can see, just came out, and I have created a great new way of understanding economics in a very logical way. One of the things that I do that's very different is I start with the profit and loss income statement. So in essence, I integrate in economics, accounting and finance, bringing it all together by starting with something simple as the profit and loss statement, and then I get into supply and demand and that sort of thing. So that's the first innovation. The second innovation is my 4-stage model of the macroeconomy. And so that is resources is the first stage, then production, then distribution, and finally consumption or investment. And so the idea is that, every commodity, every good and service that we use has to go through this process that takes time, takes a lot of work and effort. Land, labor, and capital have to work together. So you start with resources, whether it's natural resources or some kind of raw commodity. Then you produce it, making it more useful. Then you need to distribute it. And then finally you consume it or you invest it. So that's my 4-stage model. But believe it or not, it's not in any of the other. My textbook has the P&L statement, which doesn't exist in most textbooks. My 4-stage model, that's not in textbooks. And the final thing I discovered a new way to show that it is savings and investment that drive the economy rather than the consumer. And most textbooks offer a Keynesian view that consumption drives the economy.
That is so against the mainstream nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, the mainstream is that you got to get the consumer to buy, to spend. Spend. Saving is bad right now. It's the so-called paradox of thrift. And see, I think that's really bogus. And so my third innovation is to demonstrate that it's saving and investment that drive the economy. Consumer spending is the effect, not the cause of prosperity. So it's really a pretty radical, revolutionary textbook, but I think it's very much a part of the Austrian school of business, the Austrian theory that fits in better with my model of how the economy works.
And sometimes it is said that understanding economics is against intuition. People have difficulty understanding economics because it's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Well, it often is counterintuitive. And the perfect example of this is consumption versus savings. Most people say, well, if consumers spend less, how can savings be good? If consumers spend less, that means business produces less, right? And of course the answer is, well, not really, because business makes decisions on what to invest in and whether to hire people and so on based on 2 factors. One is current consumption. Current consumption, what consumers are buying now, and also what are consumers going to buy in the future? And we often forget that latter part. Well, what are consumers going to buy in the future? What new products are you going to develop for them? Or how are you going to improve the quality of an automobile or a whole new product? When you look at new products, take the iPod, for example, or the cell phone. Let's use the cell phone, which everybody uses, okay? Now, who came up with this idea? Did the consumer come up with this idea? Did the consumer say, I want a cell phone? Well, as a matter of fact, they didn't come up with this idea. A business person, an innovator, an inventor came up and said, I think consumers would want to have a cell phone. And they came up with the cell phone. And they hired people, even though there's no current consumption of a cell phone. Business people created, whether it's Motorola or Nokia in Finland, they came up with the idea, and they hired workers, and they bought raw commodities and produced these cell phones, knowing or hoping that investors, that consumers would buy these things. So they created jobs and so forth, all in expectation of what the consumer wanted in the future, not what they're consuming now. So why would business start hiring people when you're in a slump? Well, the answer is business reaches a point where they say, in the future, consumers are going to want to buy more. So with the retained earnings that we have, with the capital that we have, or we can borrow capital, we will start investing and hiring now. And that's how you get out of a slump, which we're in right now, this financial crisis. It will be business that brings us out of it, not consumer spending, not government spending, but business investing, which is the key to prosperity. For the future, yeah. And then when they start hiring, they start hiring now. So that's when you get the trough in the business cycle and the turnaround. It's not by consumers suddenly saying we're going to consume more. They will consume more later, but not now.
Sure, and you provide financial assistance or advice?
That's correct.
And how does Austrian economics contribute to provide sound financial advice in the midst of a crisis?
Well, that's a good question, Luis, and it is valuable in analyzing what's happened, because the Austrians say that there's no free lunch, and that when you lower interest rates and adopt an easy money policy, which the Fed did, our government did in several years ago, they lowered interest rates to 1% and so forth. They created an artificial boom in the markets. Now, we profited from that. As an Austrian economist, I said, well, that's on the upside, we're going to have higher stock prices, higher real estate prices. So I was recommending all those things. But we had stop losses because we knew that it was unsustainable, and that eventually the boom had to turn into a bust, and the bull market turns into a bear market. So we got stopped out of our real estate investment trusts, some of our financial stocks. So we sold those and avoided the collapse. At the same time, I now think that the market has bottomed out. In my March newsletter, I showed a graph saying we've reached maximum pessimism. And I think we're going to see a rally here, and we've got a rally of 25% since then. Because every bear market eventually works itself through and you get a recovery, and I think we're in that phase now finally.
Well, thank you very much for this hope in the future.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing these ideas with us. And thank you.